And today we're talking about a really important subject. Perhaps you've given it some thought. Perhaps it's never even crossed your mind. You just assume that things will work themselves out should you pass on for whatever reason. But we're talking about the importance of having a will, particularly in specific circumstances. And I am pleased to have Usiphumelele Ndumo on the line with us, financial advisor, MD of Thuthuka SA, as well as an author of a really, really awesome book that will certainly help with this particular discussion, Debt to Riches. How are you doing, Usiphumelele?
Hi, Bonolo. I'm keeping well. I would also like to greet listeners.
Thank you so much for giving us your time, as always. Yes, I'm glad that we're talking about this particular topic, because so often, I remember a couple of years ago, right, where it was announced, or at least I think that's how it went. All I know is that I seem to have this idea in my head, and it came from a law or policy or something that was set in place in the country where if you had lived with someone for a year or 2 or 6 months or something like along those lines, I can't remember the exact period of time, you were essentially considered as someone who had rights. So let's say, for example, you've lived 6 months together, you've bought furniture, you've bought this, that, and the other. Should anything happen to that person, right? Or for whatever reason you guys decide you no longer want to live together, then you have specific rights as a partner of sorts. So I wanted us to talk a little bit about what that looks like, particularly in terms of the law, and should that other supposed partner pass on. How does that work?
You know, Bonolo, the question of what happens when somebody passes on. It's a difficult one if you are cohabiting.
Yes.
Because if that person does not have a will in place, then they are basically dying intestate, which means they died without a will.
Right.
Now, at that point, the Intestate Succession Act kicks in. And the Act is very clear. It does not recognize cohabiting partners as a spouse. Because I'm not so sure, maybe these laws don't talk to each other. But then again, the issue of cohabiting, is it possible for one person to cohabit with more than one partner?
Yeah, no.
You know? And so it could even raise all of those questions.
Yes.
So I always say to my customers, for me, it is to protect you as my customer if I'm your financial advisor.
Mm-hmm.
You are cohabiting with somebody, and as you rightly say, you may even have, and this often happens to women.
Yes.
Somebody may invite you to come and live with them, and you find that this person, this is their home, it is in their name, and you move in with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you buy furniture and you do all of these things. And then one day he passes on. His family says, that is our son's home.
Mm-hmm.
You are not married. The Act says we do not recognize cohabiting partners. So I think to simplify things, and if that person really cares about you, but for some reason does not want to marry you, the safest thing to do is ask him to draft a will. So that one day when he passes on, you are not related to this person by blood. You were just living with him.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might not inherit anything. But if you have children together, the Interstate Succession Act recognizes the children because they are his blood relatives. So the children will inherit. And I have, seen in many instances this happening. Mm-hmm. One of my customers also was cohabiting with somebody. They were not married, and they had a child together, and there was no will. The child, fortunately, there's money that has been allocated to this child, but she didn't get anything. So these things happen. So if that partner or the father of the child wanted her to inherit, he should have drafted a will, because that is the only way around it. Draft a will and say, when I pass on, I want my partner to then inherit ABC, so that there's no conflict.
Yes.
Yes.
Here's what I want to know, and we'll get back to the key reasons for having a will, why it's so important in a while, because I think all of us just think of one reason and no other. Does having a life cover take precedence over having a will? Because sometimes people think to themselves, well, I've got a life cover in place. If anything happens to me, my children will be taken care of. They'll be able to go to school, maybe go to varsity, and that's that. And I don't have to worry about anything else.
Having a life cover is important, very important, especially if you are a parent and you have young children.
Mm-hmm.
But that on its own is not enough. The biggest risk that you face is when you pass on and you do not have a will. I've seen people nominating their children who are very young as beneficiaries of that life cover. Now, can you imagine a 5-year-old with 2 million because the parent has died? So, again, the question will be, who is going to be the guardian of this child?
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest risk you face is all of that life cover money may end up being paid out to the guardian who is expected to look after your minor children.
Yes.
And it has happened, Guardians are named and they look after the children. They take the money, they go and they buy cars, they buy homes. So the money ends up not being used for the intended objective. Because as a parent, when you nominate your child, and people do this because they don't understand how these things work, which is why I'm happy that, we're taking time to speak about these things.
Yeah.
You nominate a child who is underage, a guardian would have to be found. And sometimes, remember, as a guardian could be the other parent. What if you are not married to that parent and is not even, taking care of your child?
Mm.
And what if the guardian ends up being your sibling, who you don't even get along well with?
Mm-hmm.
So that is why when you have children, yes, you may have life cover, but that life cover may end up being used not for the reasons that you took it out for.
Yes.
It may end up in people's hands that you may never have wanted to have this money. So yes, have life cover, but alongside the life cover, have a will, so that you state that should I die while my children are young, this is what I want to see happening with my life cover. Mm-hmm. And the best thing to do is to say, I want my life cover, because when you die, your will, a trust is created, a testamentary trust only when you pass on.
Yes.
And then the trustees will invest the money for the benefit of your children, and they'll pay the school fees for your children, they'll pay the varsity fees for your children, and they may even pay, monthly living costs to cater for clothing and pocket money and all of that, depending how much money you left. And if there's still money when the children are maybe 25 years old, then they can get the money. At that age, they are responsible, they are mature.
Yes.
But I have seen examples. One of my customers said to me, when their mother passed on, she left her and the younger brother money.
Mm.
And the younger brother was still underage. So the money was never used for his education. The relatives took it and they did whatever they wanted to do with it. And, that happens. That's the risk that you face. So yes, life cover is important, but have a will so that you give instructions how your life cover must be used. And I'm sure all parents want their life cover to be used for the school fees of their children, for the varsity fees of their children, and not for anything else.
I want us to take a step back a bit, just talking about that part. So you've got the things that you want the life cover to be used for. So, and in your will, you need to specify to say, I want the life cover to be used for these specific things, but also you need to specify who you want to administer that? Or are you saying that if you don't specify, does the state then take over and appoint a person to make sure that that happens? Or how does that work?
Part of drafting a will is to name what you call a guardian.
Okay.
A guardian is a person that will look after your child.
Okay. All right.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So that needs to be included in there if the funds are going to be used accordingly.
Yes. I mean, I've seen especially single parents.
Yes.
This person may have moved on, the father of your child may have moved on and married somebody else. You may not even be getting along and all of that. So in the will, they will name somebody that they know cares for them and cares for their child.
Mm-hmm.
To say, should I pass on, then I want this person, could be their sister, their brother, or somebody else to be the guardian. But then, again, even though you name that guardian, this is the beauty of having a will. It doesn't mean that your life cover is going to be paid to that guardian. No. The trustees, because the will enables you to have trustees
mm-hmm.
and have a guardian and have executors. So those are the people that you appoint. And those ideally need to be different people so that there is oversight and, there is no conflict of interest.
Yes.
And I always say, I prefer that you leave some of these things to the professionals. What do we know about why, as ordinary people, what do we know about winding up an estate?
Not much.
So not much. So there will be delays, there will be errors, and you may end up, this costing you more than if you just, used, professional executors to wrap up your will, who know what to do to wrap up your will quickly. And the trustees, their role is to then invest the money for the children and make sure that the school fees are paid, it's preferable beginning of each year.
Yeah.
And, when the child finishes high school and they apply to varsity, school fees are paid at the university. And then what is the role of the guardian? The guardian, you still need an adult.
Yes.
Especially if you die while the child is very young. And that adult will be the one to maybe drive the child to school and drop them off there. And the monthly money that will look after the child's needs, like cosmetics and pocket money and all of that, may then be given to the guardian to look after the child. So that is the role of the guardian. But the guardian will not receive the full lump sum.
Yes.
So if your life cover is R1 million, the guardian is not going to receive R1 million in their account. What they're going to receive is maybe the monthly money to be able to buy school uniforms and to buy clothes.
And food and all of that.
And food and all of that.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is the role of the guardian, is to look after your child. That is why it's got to be somebody that loves you and loves your children, cares about you. Because the other parent is a natural guardian, which means they are the father or the mother of this child.
Yes.
But as we know, that person may not even be in the child's life. So it's not, therefore, in the best interest of the child to have that person suddenly having this money to look after the child.
No, absolutely. If you've just joined us, welcome. We're in conversation with Phumelele Ndumo, a financial advisor and author, talking about the importance of having a will in place and the implications, particularly where the law is concerned, or what happens in a situation where perhaps you haven't sorted that type of stuff out. And too often we assume a lot of things that aren't actually based on fact or truth. So it's important to clear these things out of the way. Perhaps we can talk about the reasons why it's important to have a will, because I know, just as a lay person, I just think to myself, just so that when I pass on, everyone can know how to divide up my estate and that my children are well taken care of. But that's pretty much All that comes to mind, at least for me. But why is it so important? Are there other reasons besides the obvious?
Yes, and let me just name them one by one.
Yes, please.
What we often don't understand is that when we die, there are fees and taxes to be paid.
Oh, really?
Yes, that executor who will wrap up your estate must be paid. And depending on how much money that you have, the more money you have, the more costly these things become. So and for those people who own properties, we have people who own more than one property. They are likely to have to pay capital gains tax when they pass on. And then if you have an estate of, let's say, above 3.5 million, you may even have to pay estate duty. That is why some people call it a wealth tax. So, and that's why you sometimes find that somebody, we all know this person had money, they had properties, and then they pass on. Then you suddenly see properties being sold. What is going on? There was not cash to be able to pay executors, to be able to pay taxes like capital gains tax, estate duty. And when I do a will for my customers, for example, one of the key things I do is to calculate what are these costs that you have to pay when you pass on. And then one has to make sure that the life cover amount is enough to at least pay all of these costs, so that there is no need for a house to be sold or a car to be sold to pay executors, because that can also delay the winding up of your estate. If there's no money to pay the executors, there's no money to pay the taxes, it's just going to take too long. And then because the executors must still sell some assets to raise cash.
Ah, okay.
Yes, to raise cash to pay the taxes and to pay their fees. So that is one important reason why it's important to have a will, is so that as you draft the will, you then check that there's enough money to pay all of these things. And of course, as we just spoke earlier, if you have children, just because you've passed on, it should not be, the end for your children. They must still be able to go to school. They must be able to go to varsity and finish their studies. So that is why, again, in your will, you then want to make sure that you state those wishes in your will so that your money doesn't end up going to a relative that might use it for something else.
Right.
And so the will also then means you can appoint a guardian, somebody who will look after your child. And that person does not always have to be the natural parent. And what if that other parent has passed on as well? So it gives the opportunity to think about, and I know when the children are still young, it's naturally, what about these things? What will happen one day if I pass on? Who will look after my children? So the will enables you to think these things through.
Yeah.
And I also say to customers, it's best that you speak to that guardian so that there are no surprises.
Yes.
And they know that should you die one day, you would love them to look after your children. I think it just makes things easy. And again, there are children with special needs.
Yes.
Now, when you can also look after them through a will. And now when you have a child with special needs, sometimes it is such that that child may be 30, 40, 50, but because of a disability, they will never be able to look after themselves.
Right.
So now, through a will, you can then make sure that they are taken care of. You can say things like, the house that you have must never be sold as long as that child is alive, so that they always have a roof over their head.
Yes.
You know, it does not mean that you are giving the house to them to own, because that might not be the best thing to do.
Yes.
But then at least you can state that this home that we live in, for as long as this child of mine, who is a special needs child, they may be mentally disabled or some other challenge, as long as they live, this house must not be sold, so that you can rest in peace knowing that they will always have a home, even if you are no longer around.
Alrighty.
So that becomes important. And also, remember with life covers and so forth, there is money to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
One of the saddest things that I've seen is, you know, once you are 18, you are an adult. But you know, Bonolo,
yes.
at 18, you are still immature.
Very much so.
And if there is a will, if there is no will, you know, and suddenly you turn 18, you receive that 1 million that your parent left you, that 18-year-old is going to go crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and they'll suddenly have so many friends.
Yes.
And they'll buy nice cars, they'll throw parties every day. And we've seen these things happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, parents leave money behind and children spend all of it. And before you know it, there's no money. And they are struggling to cope.
Sure.
So if you have a will, you can say, my child must only receive this money when they have graduated.
Mm.
And you know that you've left enough life cover so that there's no reason to say, how can my mom say I can receive this money when I've graduated, because there's no money for me to go to school, there's no money for me to go to university. So if you have a will, you can almost control your child and make sure that they continue to study. When they finish matric, they further their studies, because in your will you have said they can only receive this money when they have a qualification.
Yes.
So in a way, you're protecting your children against themselves by so doing. And I think one of the most important things, you know, for that helps with the will is to say, whatever I leave behind for my children, it can be the house, it can be the money. When my children get married, or even if they are married now, whatever I leave for them is never going to be part of their marital estate.
Or in cases where they could be married in community of property, for an example.
Yes. And I mean, these things may sound like jokes, but it's true. And I've seen them. Somebody dies, there's money, and very quickly people get married. because there's money.
Yeah.
And if there was no will to protect that estate, before you know it, there's a divorce, and the other party walks away with 50%.
Yeah.
Yes. So in a will, you can say, my children, whether they are married now or they are young at this point, they are going to marry in the future. And I don't care whether they marry in court of property or they marry antinuptial contract, but these assets that I'm leaving for them,
yes,
must not form part of their marital estates, regardless of how they get married. So you protect your child.
That is very interesting, actually, that you can have that in there. I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
Yes. You can stipulate that those things fall outside of their marital estates. And, you know, I've seen this again. Well, I don't quite like this one, but people do this. You know, you marry to somebody, and you die while you're still young. You obviously want them, and you may even have children together. So you want them to inherit, you know, the house, so that, you know, life continues. But then you can state in a will that should your partner then decide to get married in the future, then at that point, this house no longer belongs to them.
I guess that's why it's important to discuss these things while you are both still alive, to be in agreement about how this will look.
Well, the reality is when it comes to drafting of a will, it's a very private thing.
Oh.
And what I often say to my customers, even if they are married, I say when it comes to drafting a will, or rather, we draft 2 separate wills for you.
Okay.
So that you don't agree to something and you know that's not what you want to see happening. Because the risk of you drafting a will with me in front of your other or of your spouse as a joint will is that if you know the law, you're going to say, I actually don't like what I said in that will. And because the law says the most recent will is the valid will, then one of you goes and drafts a will with someone else, which contradicts what you just said in the will that we've drafted as a joint will.
And I suppose in some instances, depending on personalities, or in some instances, there can even be abuse in relationships. But whoever has the stronger personality then gets their way, and the other one hardly has a voice in the will.
Yes, and you find that there's unhappiness. So if that person knows their rights, they'll just go elsewhere and draft a will. So you don't want that happening. But also, I mean, as an advisor, for instance, just to give you a sense, one of the key things I always say is when it comes to homes, especially a family home, you don't want to bequeath or leave that to your children.
Oh, okay.
You want to leave that to the other, to your wife or to your husband.
I hear you.
Why? Because you don't want your children one day when you've passed on to kick out their mother or their father out of the house.
Hi, Bo. Who does that?
These things do happen. You know, money is money.
Oh, goodness.
Money is money. You know, your dad dies and he left the house in your name, but he's married to your mom. It's very tempting if you're short of cash to say, you know what, mom, I own 50% of this house. So I want us to sell it so that I can get my share. But in reality, I don't think that is what that person wanted to do. They just thought, you know what, me and my wife are the same age, so when we die, I want my child or my son to inherit this house, not understanding that by doing that in a will, then they are opening the other spouse to the risk of the child or the children suddenly saying, let's sell this house because we have shares in this house.
Sure.
And if the mother doesn't have money to buy them out,
wow.
they could end up selling that house. Yes. So the best thing to do is to say, I want my wife or my husband to have our family home. But then when they pass on, then this is who I want to inherit. And then you can name the children.
Yes.
But the condition is only when the other partner has passed on.
Oh, wow. Sure.
Yes,
this has been very informative.
So I think this discussion has basically highlighted the importance of having a will. It's really to safeguard the interest of the people that you love.
Yeah. I want to paint one more scenario as we wrap things up. You often hear cases, really bizarre cases, where you've got a husband who passes on. Suddenly the in-laws blame the wife for his passing on. And suddenly they start demanding the house, the cars, whatever the case might be, claiming that these were our child or our son's things, and therefore, they have a right to lay claim to them. I suppose in a case like this, then is the will the only way to ensure then that type of scenario does not happen?
Not necessarily. This is the thing with money. Sometimes money can turn people into monsters. Because if your son is married and they pass on, depending how they were married, generally people still unfortunately marry in court of property.
Yes.
Even if that person is married in court of property, that wife is her home. You know, and I know of these stories, and I hear of these stories as well. You know, but it's not fair. I think it's just opportunistic.
Yes.
On the part of the in-laws. People die young, you know. So why is it that when your son dies suddenly, it's because the wife bewitched him or poisoned him and all of that? You know, the thing is, money sometimes creates monsters, and people will say or do anything to suddenly have a claim on something that legally they don't have a claim over.
Yes.
But as a married person, you are better protected than somebody who is cohabiting.
Indeed.
Yes. So for me, I'm going to go back to my trade and say, as a financial advisor, what I want to see happening is, you know, if I'm a customer, I want to make sure that you are protected and cared for in that marriage or that relationship, even if that the other party passes on. And the best way to do it is through a will.
No, absolutely. Siphumelele, this has been so helpful and so informative. I'm sure a lot of people have gained some perspective and have been essentially forced to think about things that they might not have given consideration to. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
The best way is to either email us or phone our offices. Our office number is 011 568 7692. And the email address is info, I-N-F-O, at Thuthuka, Thuka, hyphen, as in a manner sign, SA for South Africa, .co.za.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sis Phumelele. This has been really, really fantastic. May the good Lord bless you as you continue to grow and empower us to be more financially sound, I suppose, as we all should be. And yeah, have an awesome, awesome rest of the weekend.
Thank you so much, Bonolo. Thank you.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye. That was Phumelele Ndumo, the author, MD of Thuthuka SA and financial advisor, talking to us about the importance of having a will. When there's key reasons, really, really incredible, right? So many things that you haven't thought of. If you want to get in touch with her, that number again, 011 568 7692. That's the office line. Alternatively, do email info at Thuthuka spelled THUKA hyphen sign, or the minus sign, if you will, sa.co.za. So if you haven't thought about it, please get in touch and draft that will as soon as possible. As you heard, life cover is not guaranteed that things will go according to plan, and there's all that wrapping up of the estate that can take forever and all that jazz. So do the right thing and make sure that things are in place. It's not only the right and responsible thing to do, it's also the God honoring thing to do, right? To have these things orderly and in place. All righty, let's go to some music now. Here is William McDowell singing Spirit Breakout, followed by Jabu Hlongwane with Nguye, and then of course we go on to our health tip for the day.